Welcome back to Top 5. Christopher Lee Watts. Christopher Lee Watts, born May 16, 1985, in Spring Lake, North Carolina, began his life as an often ordinary child raised in a traditional family setting. He grew up experiencing the typical ups and downs of adolescence, ultimately establishing himself in the workforce as a diligent oil field operator for Anadarko Petroleum. Nonetheless, beneath this perceived normalcy lay deep-seated issues that would catalyze one of the most horrific family crimes in American history. In 2010, Chris met Shannon Razusek, an extroverted and driven woman, during a blind date facilitated by mutual friends. Shannon, who was immersed in the world of multi-level marketing, quickly fell for Chris. They married on November 3, 2012, in a ceremony that solidified their outward appearance as a couple destined for happiness. The couple eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie in 2013 and Celeste Catherine in 2015. Their life was often broadcasted on social media, painting a picture of a successful family engaged in adventurous activities and family bonding. In reality, however, the family was operating under a veneer of happiness that masked brewing discontent and hidden strife. As the family expanded, strains began to mount. Financial pressures increased when the Watts family declared bankruptcy in 2015, which further fueled tensions within their marriage. Chris's increasing feelings of entrapment were compounded by the emergence of an extramarital affair with a coworker, Nicole Kessinger. The allure of a new relationship drew Chris further away from Shannon, complicating his emotions and setting the stage for catastrophic choices. On the fateful day of August 13, 2018, everything came to a head. Shannon, returning home from a business trip, confronted Chris about their marital issues and his affair. The emotional toll led to an explosive argument, ultimately pushing Chris past his breaking point. In a fit of rage, he strangled Shannon, taking her life in their bedroom. While the world grappled with understanding how such brutality could arise, Chris then turned the violence toward his daughters, who had been asleep in their beds. He suffocated Bella and Celeste, committing an unfathomable act of paternal betrayal. Following the murders, Chris displayed chilling calmness and calculated behavior as he concealed his crimes. He buried Shannon's body in a shallow grave near an oil storage site, while placing Bella and Celeste's bodies into large oil tanks, effectively erasing all traces of their existence. In the immediate aftermath, Chris feigned grief, engaging with social media and local news in a disingenuous display of concern. As investigators began to piece together the timeline and Chris's behaviors, the facade began to crumble rapidly. Surveillance footage captured his dubious movements just prior to the discovery of his family's remains, leading detectives to delve deeper into his actions on that harrowing day. With mounting pressure, Chris ultimately confessed to the murders during an interrogation session with law enforcement, detailing his grotesque actions while expressing a disturbing detachment that shocked millions across the nation. Charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, Chris pled guilty on November 6, 2018, in a plea deal that spared him the death penalty at the request of Shannon's family. Ultimately, on November 19, 2018, he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole, in addition to an additional 84 years for tampering with human remains. The Watts case became emblematic of the fragility of familial relationships and served as a gripping reminder of the darkness that can lurk within couples, and even fathers, who outwardly present as loving family men. Numerous documentaries and media analyses of Chris's behavior have emerged following his sentencing, exploring the various psychological aspects and societal constructs that contributed to his actions. Experts examine the motivations behind his destructive choices, raising discussions about the broader theme of toxic masculinity and the pressures surrounding men to maintain traditional roles within households. Chris Watts's case resonates profoundly as it plunges communities into an unsettling reflection on domestic violence, infidelity, and the perversions that can exist beneath the guise of normalcy. 4. Andrea Yates. Born on July 3, 1964, in Houston, Texas, Andrea Yates's troubling legacy crystallizes the complex intersections between mental illness, motherhood, and societal expectations in a narrative wrought with despair and tragedy. Raised in a loving yet strict household with 4 siblings, Andrea exhibited academic success early on, eventually positioning herself to study nursing. This career offered her an avenue to care for others, yet proved not to be a safeguard against the tempest brewing within her own psyche. Andrea married Russell "Rusty" Yates in 1993, and together, they articulated a desire to have as many children as possible, often driven by their deeply entrenched religious beliefs. The couple welcomed 5 children: Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and Mary. However, Andrea experienced severe postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis following each delivery, struggles masked by a denial of her deteriorating mental health. Each subsequent child only added to her emotional burden, compounding the challenges of motherhood while her mental state continued to decline. By the summer of 2001, Andrea's mental health conditions had reached a breaking point. Doctors had prescribed numerous medications, although Rusty largely disregarded mental health professionals who advised against further pregnancies. Despite increasingly desperate pleas for help, Andrea remained trapped in a vicious cycle of despair and isolation exacerbated by psychological trauma. On June 20, 2001, in a horrific and unfathomable act of rage and delusion, Andrea systematically drowned her 5 children in their bathtub, believing she was saving their souls from eternal damnation. As each child drew their last breath, Andrea showed no signs of remorse, emotionally detached and ensnared in a fog of psychosis. Afterward, she called the police and confessed, revealing her conviction that her actions were a moral obligation to protect them from sin. The shocking nature of the crime stirred public outrage and ignited debate surrounding maternal mental health. During the trial in 2002, Andrea was found guilty of capital murder, yet the conversation surrounding her mental health struggles gained traction. Experts highlighted the societal stigma surrounding postpartum conditions, emphasizing how the judicial system failed to adequately consider the psychological factors at play. Ultimately, Andrea's conviction was overturned in 2006 due to faulty expert testimony, indicating a severe miscalculation regarding her mental health by the legal system. In her 2006 retrial, Andrea was deemed not guilty by reason of insanity, affirming the realities of her mental health struggles and catalyzing important discussions about the systems meant to protect vulnerable mothers. She was committed to a mental health facility for treatment, becoming a poignant figure in the ongoing efforts to reform mental health care for women during and after pregnancy. The story of Andrea Yates reverberates within the collective conscience as it reflects the catastrophic consequences of neglect regarding mental health. It showcases the urgent need for enhanced support systems, promotion of education regarding postpartum mental illness, and the cultivation of safe environments for mothers facing mental health challenges. Andrea's case serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, how quickly love can devolve into despair, leaving unhealed wounds that may never fully recover. 3. John Emil List. The harrowing saga of John Emil List offers a gripping examination of the psychological strains that can render a man capable of unspeakable acts against his family. Born on September 17, 1925, in Bay City, Michigan, John was the eldest child in a devoutly religious household where discipline and moral rectitude were paramount. This upbringing instilled in him a strong sense of duty and honor that later manifested in morally dubious choices, leading to catastrophic outcomes. After serving in the U.S. Army during World War II, John returned home and married Helen Morris Taylor in 1951. The couple eventually welcomed 3 children, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick. However, as John's work life began to unravel after losing his job at a local bank in 1971, he felt an overwhelming sense of desperation impeding his capacity to provide for his family. Determined to maintain the facade of a model family man, he withdrew further into shame, choosing to hide his unemployment from his wife and children. On November 9, 1971, List's pathological desperation reached a fever pitch. In a tragic convergence of hopelessness and delusion, John murdered his wife Helen and his aging mother, Alma, before turning his gun on his 3 children as they returned home from school. He executed each one of them, methodically carrying out the most egregious acts of violence against those he was supposed to love. Following the grisly murders, John arranged the bodies of his family members in the ballroom of their home, leaving them to be discovered days later. In the wake of the killings, John fled the state, discarding his identity, moving to various locales while living under the assumed name Robert Peter Clark. While he was able to evade capture for nearly 2 decades, the emotional and psychological toll of his actions haunted him. He was hunted by law enforcement and captivated by the escape from his reality, embarking on a new life characterized by continuous evasion. The case took a dramatic turn in 1989 when America's Most Wanted featured John List, leading to his capture after a neighbor recognized him from the segment. During his trial, John claimed that he believed he had to kill his family to save their souls from eternal damnation. This rationalization only deepened the public's horror, revealing the unsettling intersection of his religious beliefs and deteriorating mental state. Convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder in 1990, John List was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, forever sealing his fate within the confines of prison. He died on March 21, 2008, after spending 18 years in custody, a life that underscored the stark contrast between personal beliefs, psychological turmoil, and the reality of familial responsibility. The legacy of his case is a disturbing reminder of how deeply ingrained ideas about morality and duty can manifest in violence when left unchecked by societal understanding and intervention. Public discourse surrounding the List case has also inspired broader conversations about the hidden signs of domestic violence and familial tensions. The assumptions made about the safety and sanctity of family bonds act as a stark reminder that darkness can fester beneath the surface of everyday life, waiting for the right circumstances to surface. 2. Robert Charles Brown. Robert Charles Brown embodies one of the most disturbing narratives in the realm of true crime, a deeply complex figure entangled in webs of manipulation, violence, and a thirst for notoriety. Born on October 31, 1952, in Coushatta, Louisiana, Brown grew up in a family that had its share of struggles. His upbringing fostered traits within him that would later spiral into a life marked by violence and chaos. Brown enlisted in the Army, where he served in Vietnam. However, his return home proved challenging as he struggled to adapt to civilian life, which exacerbated his already problematic behavior patterns. Over the years, he navigated a series of failed marriages and troubled relationships marked by aggression and dysfunction. Although his actions drew concern, it was not until the late 1990s that Brown would be implicated in unspeakable crimes against women. In 1995, Brown was arrested for the murder of a woman named Heather Dawn Church, marking a significant turning point in his life. During the ensuing investigations, Brown began to confess to a staggering number of additional murders, or as he termed them, confessions of a killer. His claims indicated he had stalked, abducted, and murdered as many as 49 women across various states, a hyperbolic assertion that experts couldn't fully corroborate. Brown sent letters to law enforcement in which he elaborated on various murders, meticulously detailing supposed scenarios where he had preyed on women he deemed vulnerable. His penchant for grandiosity left investigators grappling with the difficult task of distinguishing truth from deception, raising complex questions about what constitutes a true confession and the motivations behind such claims. In 1996, Brown was convicted for the murder of Church and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Physical evidence linking him to the crime solidified his culpability in the eyes of the court. Nevertheless, the controversy surrounding his confessions propelled a wider conversation about serial killers and criminal psychology. Whether he had genuinely committed the myriad of murders he claimed or was merely seeking fame through infamy remains an ongoing inquiry for criminologists and psychologists alike. Brown's chilling admissions and the lack of corroborating evidence placed his psychological state under scrutiny, giving rise to discussions about the lengths to which individuals may go to seek validation, society's fascination with killers, and the broader implications of mental illness on habitual criminal behavior. 1. The Turpin family case, David and Louise Turpin. The saga of David and Louise Turpin represents one of the most harrowing family horror stories in contemporary American history. Born in the 60s, David Turpin initially carved out a career as an engineer, taking pride in his work and his image as a devoted husband and father. Louise, born in 1968, met David during their high school years, and they married in 1985. Together, the couple embarked on a journey that would culminate in the birth of 13 children. As their family grew, so too did the disturbing realities behind closed doors. On the surface, David and Louise constructed an image of a devoutly religious household, often showcasing their family through social media and church involvement. However, beneath this facade lay a tale of unimaginable abuse. The couple adopted extreme measures to control their children's lives, ensuring their total isolation from the outside world, while simultaneously restricting their basic needs and freedoms. The Turpins maintained a tightly controlled environment characterized by physical abuse, psychological manipulation, and neglect. Their children were subjected to unsanitary living conditions, often denied adequate food and medical attention. Many of them reported rarely bathing and facing physical restraints, leading to severe malnutrition and emotional trauma. Home life was pervaded by fear, a jail-like atmosphere where rebellion was met with brutal punishments, and independence was non-existent. Despite the grotesque conditions in which they lived, the Turpin children managed to maintain a semblance of family unity. They engaged in moments of creativity, often documenting their experiences through drawings and journals, while relying on one another for emotional support. Nonetheless, the isolation and harsh realities of life under their parents' control stunted their social development, leaving them ill-prepared to navigate the world outside. Tensions ultimately boiled over on January 14, 2018, when Jordan Turpin, 17 at the time, managed to escape from the confines of her home. She reached out to law enforcement, unveiling a horrifying truth about the life her siblings were enduring. Responding to her desperate call for help, authorities stormed the family residence, discovering a scene that would horrify the nation. Police encountered children and young adults living in abysmal conditions, some shackled and emaciated, their physical and emotional scars evident. The Turpin family's subsequent exposure to the public ignited outrage and disbelief, prompting critical reassessments of societal frameworks designed to protect at-risk children. In the wake of the scandal, experts examined systemic failures that allowed such abuse to continue for years without detection, raising vital questions about the capacity of child protective services and the mechanisms employed to intervene in suspected cases of child abuse. David and Louise Turpin were arrested and charged with numerous counts of torture and child abuse, ultimately pleading guilty in 2019. Their sentences were severe, reflective of the magnitude of their crimes: life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The Turpin case has continued to reverberate, drawing attention to the urgent need for reform within child welfare systems, the importance of community vigilance, and advocacy for the rights of children facing torment at the hands of their parents. In the aftermath of their sentencing, the surviving Turpin children began their long, arduous journey toward healing, navigating the complexities of rediscovering themselves outside the horrors of their past. They have demanded a voice in the ongoing discussions surrounding child state interventions, expressing hope for systemic reform that prioritizes the safety and well-being of youth.